Arthel, I just close with this great illustration I talked about today. Simon Greenleaf was a renowned Harvard law professor who was an expert in the rules of legal evidence, but he was an atheist, and he decided to try to disprove Christianity by disproving the resurrection. When he had finished his investigation, he was so convinced that it had actually happened that he became a devout Christ follower.
And that's great.
And he said,
that's great if you can, bring people over to the side, our side, but it doesn't mean that everybody wants to be there or belongs that. But for those of us who do believe, what is the message for the masses on this Easter Sunday?
Well, the message is that if Jesus Christ was raised from the dead, like we believe he is, that it means he is who he said he is, the Son of God. The Apostle Paul said that by his resurrection, he was proven to be the Son of God. And that means, Arthel, everything he said about heaven, hell, and salvation are true, and it means that his promise we shall be raised again from the dead is also true. That's great hope for everybody.
And we leave it on a positive note. Pastor Jeffress, happy Easter to you and to your family.
Thank you, Arthel.
Take care.
We'll be starting in just a moment.
I thought we just heard Senator Ron Johnson say that he's worried about the possible Russian threat to the Baltic states. Well, on Tuesday, the president will hold a Baltic state summit at the White House. The leaders of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are united in celebrating freedom after they were ruled by the Soviet Union as part of the Eastern Bloc for decades. And the three countries, the White House says, have also met their NATO spending pledge. Harry Kazianis, director of the defense studies at the Center for the National Interest, joins us now. So, Harry, the summit in 48 hours on Tuesday certainly will be a strong enough message, or a strong message to Putin, but will it be enough?
Well, Eric, I guess all I'd have to say is welcome the Cold War 2.0. I think that we're actually on the front lines of this, and the Baltics are on the front lines of this. I think President Trump has done a lot to really push back against the Russians. And to be honest with you, Eric, I don't think the president gets enough credit. If we compare what President Obama did vis-a-vis the Russians, President Trump has taken a much harder line. He's worked very hard with the Baltics to make sure that they have the military equipment they need. He's done a lot of frontline training with them. We've done a lot to reinforce our Ukrainian friends, to push back and make sure that someday, they have the opportunity to potentially join the EU and NATO. And we've also pushed back pretty strongly on the Russians in Syria. So I think the president's done a good job, and I think this further play to sort of strengthen our connections with the Baltics is a smart idea.
But at the same time, you got Moldova, Transnistria. There was a little tiny, areas in there. They could potentially succumb also.
Yeah, and this is what the Russians love to do. Their playbook is very simple. They like to destabilize countries along their periphery and essentially turn, past military actions into frozen conflicts. Whether we're talking about Moldova, especially in eastern Ukraine, and maybe even Syria, to be honest with you. What they want.
Hello, you are listening to Trump Republic Radio. It is April 1st, 2018. I'm your host, Enzo Quesada, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Bobby Hester.
Hello, everyone.
So, we're back in the studio, Bobby. I didn't think I was going to be here. I'm back in Texas, though. The stuff I was doing in Missouri wasn't so good, so, hey. It's better for the show that we're in person anyways.
Glad to have you back in the Lone Star State.
Yeah, it definitely feels good to be in Texas. The other states, not so much. Any things you want to get into, Bobby, before we get into the show today, though?
Nothing that I can really think of off the top of my head. I say we just jump right into it.
Let's go straight into the news this week, then. So the first thing we want to talk about was this 2020 census.
Yes. In a historic moment for President Trump's administration, Commerce Department Secretary Wilbur Ross has announced that a question asking United States residents if they are American citizens will be placed on the 2020 census. This marks the first time since 1950 that a citizenship question has been asked on the full census, and in doing so will provide a more accurate measurement of how many illegal aliens and non-citizens are in the country. The move also has a huge effect on redistricting of both Congress and the Electoral College. For instance, California has a population of 39.5 million people, and the Pew Research Center estimates that 2.4 million of them are illegal aliens, making up roughly 6% of the state's population. With 53 current House seats, losing 6% of them on average would mean a decline of roughly 3 House seats and therefore 3 Electoral College votes. In 3 other states, Nevada, Texas, and New Jersey, illegal aliens make up more than 5% of each state's population.
It's a very staggering number, that 6% that we're talking about with some of these upper echelon states as far as how many illegal aliens they have. But this stuff is really great because we don't want non-citizens having an impact on our elections. And they do when we have to allocate electoral college, votes for them or representatives to represent them. And because that skews left, I think we can be unapologetic about it because we don't want foreign influence in our elections. I thought that's the whole point of the Russia stuff we deal with. So,
and we were talking before the show that we actually got the idea for doing an entire midweek episode on just the 2020 census and developments behind trying to change different questions and whatnot on it, and just the impact that it will have on this country in terms of electoral votes, redistricting of the House, so and so. So we're actually planning on doing that. We might do that either this week or next week, but we're going to start doing midweek episodes again soon. I know we haven't done one in a couple of months now, actually.
Yeah.
So we are definitely well behind in getting those ready. But we want to do one that actually goes through in depth and talks about that entire thing. And so because of that, I'm going to leave my comments for that actually, and wait to talk about it. But I completely agree with you in terms of foreign influence in our elections because, as much as I hate to say it, even though Texas, along with California, will be losing electoral power both, in the Electoral College and in Congress, I think it is definitely worth it in order to make sure that these people who should not be in our country and are not allowed to be in our country are not counted in helping the other side gain power over us.
Yes. Do you want to go on to the next thing then?
Yeah, so the next story we have is kind of an update on the whole FISA abuse scandal that's been going on in terms of people looking at it, and that is that the DOJ Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, he's announced that he's actually going to finally be opening an investigation and review the FISA abuses by both the FBI and the Department of Justice following requests from both Congress and Attorney General Jeff Sessions. They released a statement, but essentially they just confirmed that they are going to review that process, they are looking into it, and if possible, they said, quote, if circumstances warrant, the OIG will consider including other issues that may arise during the course of the review. So just like the Mueller probe and how they're using, and how the left and the Democrats and the establishment is using the Mueller probe to try to just go after anything they can, trying to find a crime that's been committed, not investigating what they believe to be a crime that has been committed. Anything that we find out through the course of that investigation can then warrant its own investigation and the possible prosecutions as well. So that is some really good news for our side, and hopefully it will actually go ahead and work out.
Yeah, all I have to say is it's some solid stuff. Do you want to go on to the last top of the news thing that we have?
Yeah, the final thing that we have in the top news, on this show, we like to tell everyone updates about, what is going on in the administration, who's moving in, who's moving out. There's been a lot of turnover so far. But the next person that we have up is VA Secretary Shulkin is being replaced by Admiral Jackson. So President Trump announced Wednesday that he will be replacing Secretary of Veterans Affairs David Shulkin with Rear Admiral Ronnie Jackson, who currently serves as the White House position and has served in that position since 2013 under both Presidents Obama and President Trump. The move also comes after Shulkin has been criticized by members of both parties for improperly accepting Wimbledon tennis tickets in February and having taxpayers pay for his wife's trip to Europe. Shulkin has agreed to reimburse the government for more than $4,000 in that particular case. Shulkin was the only Obama administration official that was, up until this point, still serving in Donald Trump's cabinet. We have a statement here from Representative Mike Kaufman, Republican from Colorado, saying that Shulkin had done nothing to clean up the culture of the bureaucratic incompetence that had defined leadership at the VA. So he's being replaced by Admiral Jackson. A lot of people were complaining that Donald Trump is appointing his own physician to the job when, Trump didn't hire the guy. He was hired by Obama, and he's been great. He served Obama well, and he served Trump very well. He's the guy who gave Trump a good physical score just a few months ago, even.
Yeah.
So, we're talking about a guy that is very unbiased. He's great at what he does, and I think from what I've heard about him, he's going to be a perfect pick for the job.
Yeah, so this should be a generally good move for the VA, and, as you mentioned, it's significant, and this is the last, Obama administration official in the Trump cabinet. Now we have none. They've all been cleared out. which, you know, is a testament to the amount of turnover that has been going on at the White House. But in this instance, I mean, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, if only we could have a little more turnover of actual people that are working in government, that would be fantastic. Fortunately, it doesn't look like we're going to get that in a long time.
No. Let's go on then to some economic news. We got some good numbers, it looks like, this week. And you want to start with the GDP?
Yeah, so first off, we got some GDP update numbers. The fourth quarter 2017, the original number that they put out was 2.5%. We now have it updated by the Department of Commerce, revising it to 2.9%, so that's a good almost half a point increase there. The economists had actually only estimated it rising 2.7%. So we're actually rising, you know, slightly higher than what the economists are actually predicting we're doing. That means that the possibility of actually getting 3% economic growth for an entire year is really close for this year, depending on how things go. However, it is expected that the first quarter of 2018 is going to be a slowdown from the growth that we have seen. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It tends to slow down in the first quarter anyways. So don't be surprised if you see it only in, you know, 2.1, 2.2% GDP growth. But that does mean it is still continuously growing, which is a very good thing.
Yeah, so, you know, the economy is in a very solid state. Looking at these revised numbers, you know, we always mention the 3% is what, you know, they say you want to aim for in economic growth. 2.9, it's close enough.
Yeah, and not only that, but we also have some other good numbers that were released too. Economists had also expected that there'd be no change in consumer spending. However, it grew at 4% compared to the estimate of only 3.8%. Inflation-adjusted gross domestic income rose by 0.9%, and corporate profits also grew up 2.7% compared to the prior year, which is indicating a healthy level of growth. So, you know, all across the board, we've seen this for months now, almost for an entire year now. Great economic numbers that have been coming out. Again, you know, people like to say, is there a recession coming? I was watching CNBC this week in the middle of the day, and even they were talking about the fact that it's amazing how economists who can either be 50% right, 50% wrong when they make a guess, tend to be quite wrong, because the same people that were saying, you know, 6 months from now we're going to have a recession, it's been a year, and they're still saying, oh, we're still going to have a recession in 6 months. Those same people, they were even being called out by the hosts of the TV show saying, but we haven't, you know, the data is all good. Nothing's indicating that this is going to come soon. The only thing that they point to is the fact that the stock market is high. And even that's come down a little from where it was at when it set its record highs. So, you know, the economy is doing fantastic right now, and that's pretty much the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, and just to also articulate how well the economy is doing, we might as well move on to the next numbers we have here in terms of jobless claims. So we've reached the lowest levels we've ever seen since 1973.
Yeah, they said that the initial jobless claims for state unemployment benefits in the month of January, or no, yeah, in the month of I'm sorry, in the last week, my apologies. Initial jobless claims for state unemployment benefits dropped 12,000 to 215,000 for the week ending March 24th, which is the lowest level, as you said, since January of 1973. Data for the prior week was revised to show 2,000 fewer jobless claims received than previously reported. So again, you know, we always get revised numbers after they actually go through it from the initial thing, and even the revised numbers, I don't think I've seen any revised numbers on pretty much anything in the last year or so that's been revised bad for us. But anyways, they said that economists had forecasted that there was going to be 230 in the last week. So again, you know, you're 15,000 under the number that the economists are forecasting. Beating those expectations across the board here, there, and wherever, it's going really, really well for us. And finally, they said that jobless claims have now been below the 300,000 threshold, which is associated with a strong labor market, for 158 streaks, which is the longest such streak since 1970.
So very, very solid stuff there. Some of the best stuff we've seen in decades. Let's go on to the last stuff that we have for the economy, though, and this is some interesting developments we've seen because of the tax reform bill.
Yes, we now have, it's been a few weeks since we've had a company giving out bonuses because of tax reform, but we have another one this week, and that is McDonald's. McDonald's announced Thursday that they are expanding their education benefits program by tripling the amount of money that workers can get each year to help pay for college or trade school tuition. They also said that they are doubling the amount of workers who qualify to 400,000, which accounts for roughly half of all McDonald's workers in the United States. The crew members will be able to get up to $2,500 per year for tuition, which is an increase from only $700. Managers, however, can receive up to $3,000 per year, which is an increase from $1,050. McDonald's also announced that they are setting aside $150 million over the next 5 years in order to pay for this program. So that's great. I mean, if you consider the fact that that's going to qualify for, you know, half the McDonald's workers in the U.S., how many of them aren't going to use the program? Pretty much any McDonald's worker that wants to use this for college is going to be able to use it, and I think that is fantastic.
Yeah, this is very great stuff, and $2,500 a year on tuition is nothing to scoff at.
No, I mean,
that pays for a good number of classes.
Yeah, if you go to a regular, you know, state school like we go to, that's a significant portion, you know,
of a semester.
Yeah, that's a significant portion. That's almost half a semester, depending on, you know, how your exact fees are structured. So I think that's great.
Yeah. Let's go on now to some immigration stuff. So for the first thing with immigration, we're going to talk about some stuff happening out in California, particularly Orange County.
Yeah, and before we begin this story, I just want to preface everyone and make sure they understand where we're coming from when we first start talking about these Orange County stories. So if you've been listening to the show or been following the news the last few weeks, there's been several cities in Orange County, California that have voted to not be part of California's sanctuary policies, meaning they want to cooperate with federal law enforcement officials like ICE in helping deport people that aren't supposed to be in our country. Well, now the Orange County Sheriff has made inmate release dates public. In response to California's sanctuary state policies that limit cooperation with federal immigration officials, the Orange County Sheriff announced Monday that it is now providing information on when inmates will be released from custody. Their existing Who's in Jail online database will now include the date and time of inmates' release, a move agency officials say will enhance communications with ICE. The release date information will apply to all immigrants, not just those who are in the country illegally. Unfortunately, however, and this is kind of a bad thing, sheriff's deputies will still not be able to assist in an actual transfer to ICE agents under the state law, which essentially means ICE, unfortunately, we can't just give these people over to you, but we're going to let you know where they're going to be and when they're going to be there. If you want to come pick them up, be my guest. Unfortunately, with California sanctuary laws, that's about as far as they're going to be able to go, but a good move in the right direction.
So yeah, the battle over immigration in California is really heating up. Now we have, you know, an entire county looking to fight back against the state. Just last week we were talking about Los Alamitos voting against following their sanctuary state status.
And 2 cities followed them too.
Yeah, 2 cities now, also in Orange County, have followed suit.
It's the county itself even voted to follow suit.
Yeah, it's really something because, you know, Orange County, it's in Southern California. It has to do with, you know, the brunt of all this illegal immigration, and it, you know, everywhere surrounding them is all for this stuff.
Yeah, and if you don't really understand the politics of Southern California, at least the greater Los Angeles area, in the southern greater Los Angeles area, once you start getting near the, you know, Anaheim, Disney World, Long Beach, that area, that is Orange County. The rest of it is Los Angeles County, and then to the east you have Riverside County. Orange County historically has actually been the Republican area of Southern California. I mean, up until 2016, it was consistently voting for Republican candidates. In fact, in the House of Representatives right now, we have multiple Republicans from California that are elected in districts in Orange County. And so it's amazing how, you know, we talk about how Orange, you know, California politics is dominated by these big liberal cities like Sacramento, or, you know, like San Francisco Sacramento and Los Angeles and San Diego. Yet you forget that even in the Los Angeles area, there is still a Republican area. Now, in 2016, the area did vote for Clinton, meaning, you know, just like the rest of Southern California, through demographics and all the population changes, it is swinging more to be a Democrat stronghold, but even slower, to the point where right now it's about 50-50. Compared to the rest of the Southern California area, which might be 80-20 Democrat, 50-50 is fantastic for our side. And the fact that they do still hold power in that county, and they are joining against, here's the news that we're actually getting to. On Tuesday, the Orange County Board of Supervisors voted unanimously in favor of joining the federal lawsuit against California's sanctuary policies. Conservative activist Arthur Christopher Shaper of Torrance, California, said that it's about time we had more bodies like this standing up to the lawlessness of the California state legislature. Steps like this will ensure that American lives will matter once again. So you actually have a county that is pushing back against their state in a way that is beneficial to our side for the first time that I think we've seen in a very, very long time. And again, I support them 100%. As much as I don't like the state of California, Orange County has always been a great area. I've been there many times.
Yeah, I haven't, so I'll have to take your word for it. But continuing on down the road with what we're talking about with California, we do need to get into some of the changes they've done to their sanctuary policy.
Yeah, they've officially bent the knee, if you can use that term, and they've changed part of their sanctuary policy. California has had to issue a new guidance Wednesday, making it clear that state and local police can and should share information about illegal aliens with the Department of Homeland Security, creating a major exception to the state's new sanctuary laws. In instances where police and sheriff's departments have information on a person's legal status, they are now required to share it as required by federal law. However, they are still banned from asking about someone's immigration status and cannot hold illegal aliens in detention at the request of ICE. State and local cops can also now respond to calls for assistance from federal officials as long as there is a state law that is also being policed at the same time. I'm going to tell you, there's going to be quite a few loopholes that we're going to use to abuse that power, and I'm going to like that too. However, California deputies and officers still cannot participate in joint task forces that involve immigration enforcement, nor can they take part in programs that would deputize them to help identify and oust illegal aliens. So, even California is realizing that if they try to, if the federal government tries to challenge their state's new sanctuary policies in a court of law, they know that they are going to lose that battle. So they are trying to change it just, ever so slightly, so that part of the reason or part of the thing that they were threatening to sue them over, they actually now cannot sue them over because of this change of policy, which unfortunately for them and unfortunately for us both helps and hurts our side.
Most definitely. Let's go on now to some stuff about temporary status being revoked for Liberians. I have this story. President Trump on Tuesday decided to end the temporary protected status of more than 100,000, or not 10,000 Liberians, and has given them a one-year wind down to leave the country. The Liberians were given temporary protected status after a civil war in 1991, and then in 1999 were given a deferred enforcement departure by President Clinton, allowing them to continue to stay in the United States. Trump argued, quote, "Though consultation with appropriate executive departments and agencies and my advisors, I have been informed that conditions in Liberia have improved. Liberia is no longer experiencing armed conflict and has made significant progress in restoring stability and democratic governance." So this is good stuff. We've seen similar things done with immigrants from El Salvador. We've also seen it with, and I shouldn't say immigrants, refugees would be the correct word to say, but refugees from El Salvador and Honduras, and it's a way for us to get more of these people out. Liberia is a very dangerous country next door to Sierra Leone. We actually have a very long history with Liberia. Their constitution is essentially ours. But yeah, we don't really need these people here, and giving them a year to get their immigration more than worked up. If they want to stay here, you got time to work on it. So yeah, good stuff there.
Yeah, I have no complaints.
This next story that we got here, though, that we're going to get into on immigration is what I'd say rather humorous.
I laughed.
Yeah. So this week, Mitt Romney, he was having, you know, he's running for Senate in Utah. He was out in Provo, Utah, and he was having like a town hall situation where people can ask him questions. And during the course of the town hall, he at one point says that he is actually more of a, you know, conservative or more of a hawk on immigration than even President Donald Trump. He went on to say that, you know, if he was president, he wouldn't give any sort of amnesty or, you know, path to citizenship for DACA whatsoever.
Yeah, because he would just, you know, expand the policy and essentially legalize it.
Well,
he would just provide them with, you know, unlimited amounts of resources to continue. He would make them keep them here, but we all know Mitt Romney is lying.
So the funny thing with how it would have went, though, if Mitt Romney became president, you know, he would have just gave them work visas.
Yeah.
And these visas would continue and continue and continue until you get a Democratic president, and then they just get the amnesty. So, you know, it's humorous that he's really trying to position himself, you know, towards primarying Trump in 2020, and now to do so, he needs to say he's even more conservative on immigration than Donald Trump. At least that's what I've taken away from this little stunt here. You know, him trying to get into the Senate in 2018 gives him a platform, and I think from that platform, he'll try to move in 2020. Otherwise, what's the point with him saying that he's more conservative on immigration than Donald Trump?
The question I have, though, is, does anybody actually believe him? I mean, even like normal people that don't really pay attention to politics much, nobody believes him. I mean, I literally mean that question for the third time. Who actually thinks that Mitt Romney is more conservative on immigration, farther to the right on immigration than Trump is? I have no idea what it would be like to live in a world as that type of person. How dumb you would have to be, or how ignorant and dumb you would have to be. It's probably the more accurate way of saying it.
Now, there's some more stuff to the story here that's rather humorous. According to the Herald, Romney says he believes that there should be qualifications for DACA recipients so that they can earn their residency, such as going to college, becoming a teacher, or joining the military. And also a spokesman from you know, the Romney camp clarified in their remarks to the Boston Globe, saying that although they ruled out a pathway to citizenship for DACA, he agrees that President Obama's DACA commitment should be honored. So it's like
they walked that back.
He walked it back. I believe that correction only came a couple hours after the little event he was having, so he couldn't even stand by his little statement for a day. Rather humorous, though.
I think so.
Let's go now on to the next story that we have on immigration, and this is in the case of an illegal alien getting a weapons charge.
Yes, a 33-year-old illegal alien from Mexico living in Pratt, Kansas, which is west of Wichita, was indicted on Tuesday on federal firearms charges. Claudia Rodriguez Oviedo was indicted on 2 counts of unlawful possession of a firearm by an alien illegally in the U.S. The indictment alleges that on November 8, 2017, she possessed a Remington handgun and 35 rounds of ammunition. She is currently also serving, and get this, she is currently also serving a 12-month sentence after she was previously convicted of charges placing a fake bomb threat to a school. She was an employee at an elementary school at the time and made the bomb threat to, quote, see what it felt like. If convicted, she faces up to 10 years in federal prison and a fine of up to $250,000 on each count. Not sending their best, are they, Enzo?
Definitely not sending their best, but, you know, it's really crazy that she can even still be here after making the initial bomb threat to the school. Now we're having to deal with weapon charges. You know, immigration and, you know, illegal immigration that goes along with it. It's a matter of national security. security, and when we don't have the ability to stop and vet these people before they come in the country, we let in people like this, and it's not good. So.
Unfortunately, our tax money is going to pay for her while she is in jail instead of just sending her back to wherever Mexican city she came from. But you know, that is, I was going to say, that's not the only story that we had this week about illegal aliens committing crimes in this country, is it?
No, we got another story that we wanted to notify you on this week, and this is a twice deported illegal alien. He has allegedly raped a young girl. In what state did this happen?
I believe this happened in Washington or Oregon. I was reading
in Oregon. An illegal alien from Guatemala who was deported twice in 2013 and 2014 was arrested after allegedly raping a young girl. Anastasio Eugenio Lopez Fabian, 24 years old, was arrested after investigators determined he had sex several times with a girl younger than 14. He was charged with sexual assault and harassment. He was arrested in the parking lot outside of the courthouse after posting $25,000 bail and is now in the custody of ICE.
So this is part of that whole ICE policy about, you know, being able to arrest people at the courthouses. They just waited till he got out and then they'd say, nope, we got you. So I feel sorry for him having to spend all of his money in order to get onto bail, and now ended up back in protection in custody again, and is probably now going to be deported yet again. So hopefully this time he'll stay out of our country. I like to say, why not have a 3 strikes and you're out policy? I'd say even a 1 strike and you're out policy. But you know, as long as you have capital punishment, might as well use it, shouldn't you?
Yeah.
Especially for someone who rapes a young girl.
Yeah, now he is currently in custody in a detention center in Tacoma, Washington, according to federal records. But yeah, you mentioned the whole courthouse arrest thing. You know, when we started first doing with ICE the courthouse arrests, you saw so many articles from, you know, leftist areas saying this is the worst thing ever. Oh, they don't feel safe going anywhere. This is a guy that would be walking the streets free if they didn't do this, because you know, he posted bail, and why should he get to walk the streets free? He's not supposed to be in the country whatsoever. So good stuff by ICE there. And talking about good stuff by ICE, we got some ICE raids we want to talk about, particularly in Texas and Oklahoma.
Yes, this is the first of 2 major ICE raids that were conducted this week. The first one happened in Texas and Oklahoma during a 3-day sweep where ICE arrested 89 criminal aliens, and this 3-day sweep ended on Thursday. The aliens were from the following countries. Mexico had 59 people of them, Guatemala had 12, Honduras 8, Colombia 3, Nigeria 2, and the following countries each had 1 each: El Salvador, Laos, Nicaragua, Pakistan, and Vietnam. They were arrested for crimes including, but not limited to, rape, robbery, making terroristic threats, racketeering, various drug charges, assault, child abuse, firearms violations, liquor violations, and many others. One, a 28-year-old Mexican national, is even wanted by the Mexican government for a homicide that occurred back in 2009. 23 of those arrested had previously been deported from the United States. So again, I say, Enzo, not sending their best, are they?
Definitely not. One of the interesting things that you see there, though, is it's not just, you know, Central American nations that are sending people here. It's also Asian countries. We also had a thing this week from, you know, the Border Patrol. They released a press release that said on March 28th and 29th, they apprehended 8 illegal aliens from Bangladesh.
Did they?
And, you know, for the entire month, and this was just in Laredo, Texas, you know, for the entire month of March, they had stopped 17 Bangladeshi nationals. So, with the status of the border, we have a situation where a lot of these Asians that want to come here illegally, they're just going to Mexico themselves and coming in illegally. You know, this is what happens when we don't know who's coming to this country whatsoever.
Exactly.
And it's not, you know, a safe way to run a nation.
And you know, before we go to the next story, I'm actually going to check our stream real quick. We got a message that there might be a little sound interference, but it's something I should be able to fix very, very quickly.
As somebody who knows the VA so well, what are the things that he needs to say to you that you'd be comfortable with then?
Well, the first is there's this ongoing...
I'm not sure how long that's been going. Might have to redo a section. That's okay. We'll continue. It's probably been going the entire time, but that's all right. We'll just continue going from now on. You ready?
Yeah.
Sorry about that, folks. We'll obviously cut this out of the podcast when we actually do it. So we'll continue here.
Do you want to continue on, though, with some more ICE raids that happened this past week?
Yes, I do. So we have another story of the ICE raid. This time, it did not happen in Texas and Oklahoma. Instead, it happened in Florida, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. And instead of arresting 89 people, this time they arrested 253 of them. They were arrested, let's see. Actually, I'm sorry, there were 271 in total. 253 were from Florida, 11 were in Puerto Rico, and 7 were in the U.S. Virgin Islands. 99 of the 271 had previous criminal records for offenses such as murder, attempted murder, vehicular manslaughter, rape, aggravated assault, domestic violence, drug charges, and weapons offenses, among many others. 39 of those arrested were previously deported from the United States.
So, yeah, we are seeing with these ICE raids, not just, here in the lone state of Texas, but all across the country, and even our territories, they're starting to really pick up the pace, and it's good stuff. And, it doesn't sound like a ton, and it's not, but this is still more than we've seen in past administrations.
And we're making great efforts. I was talking to you before the show, and we were talking about that omnibus spending bill from last week. We admit it, Trump did get screwed on that one. But, we are making great headway, well, especially with a lot of these ICE raids. As hard as it is to try to get the wall built, we're still doing a lot of good things. I mean, even look at the next story that we're going to talk about, which is talking about another policy that ICE is doing. We're making a lot of success. So the next story we have is ICE is rolling back their pregnancy release policy. That is, the Trump administration on Thursday directed ICE to no longer automatically release pregnant illegal aliens from detention. According to Philip Miller, a top ICE official, 506 pregnant women have been detained since December, and as of March 20th, there are 35 that are currently in ICE custody. All women of childbearing age are tested for pregnancy at the beginning of their detention, and ICE does provide on-site care and off-site access to specialized medical care if it is deemed necessary on a case-by-case basis. So the number one thing that this is going to fix is less anchor babies. Because instead of just letting these people go to then have kids that then qualify for welfare, which lets them be able to stay in the country in many cases, they're gone. And goodbye.
Yeah. So, very, very good stuff with what ICE is doing, even though through the omnibus bill, ICE has been handicapped to a good degree. Going on now, we got to talk about this caravan going through.
Yes, the entire namesake of the episode.
So, as you said, this is the namesake of this week's episode. There is currently a caravan of people trying to migrate from Central America to the United States illegally. They're being organized by a group of volunteers called Pueblo Sin Fronteras, or People Without Borders. It's a caravan that is intended to help migrants safely reach the United States, bypassing not only authorities who seek to deport them, but gangs and cartels who are known to assault vulnerable migrants. One of the organizers, Rodrigo Abeja, I got a little quote from him saying, quote, "If we all protect each other, we'll get through this together," Abeja yelled through a loudspeaker on the morning they left Tapachula on Mexico's border with Guatemala. They've been doing this caravan march for nearly the entire length of time it's going to take them from... Originally, they came from Honduras. About 80% of them are from Honduras. We're talking about maybe 1,200 of them at this point.
Well, they said there was about 1,500 families. Is that right?
I do not know the specifics on the number of families.
Because I've heard different numbers that have been thrown around. Some people said it was 1,500 families. Some said it was only 1,500 people. But, you know, if we're talking about 1,500 families, that could be a crowd of, you know, several thousand people.
Yeah.
If it's just 1,500, I mean, granted,
it's hard
you know,
to exactly, you know, track.
It is, and that's part of the reason why this is such a big deal. Because you have this massive horde of invaders coming straight for your borders.
Oh, here, Pueblo Sin Fronteras counted about 1,200 people on the first day.
Yeah.
So there's been more people probably have gotten in the caravan. So yeah, you know, could be 1,500 families easily. But they are also having chance of, we aren't immigrants, we're international workers, and the people united will never be defeated. So there is kind of like a radical leftist strain to this. What this organization, Pueblo Sin Fronteras, this is an NGO. This is a non-governmental organization, you know, to promote illegal immigration. We saw this initially with a lot of the NGOs helping migrants from Africa, you know, illegally immigrate into the European Union. And now this is the case here on the American border. And we've seen in Europe, you know, they've lost this fight already. We are now looking at what could be a defeat if we don't do anything about this. You know, you look at the photos of this caravan, it's a giant wave of people just marching, all, you know, feeling entitled to come to this country and do as they please. You know, rules be damned, we are international workers. You know, it is very much like the book Camp of the Saints, which I've read, which is kind of a fictitious book about an instance where 1 million migrants or refugees from India come to the southern coast of France. And, you know, what we can see with this wave is that if it were to come here uninhibited, you will see more of these. That is something I feel very, very firm in my belief on, just by the nature of these NGOs. You know, where there's oxygen, they'll burn. And they'll burn all their way through to the American border if they can.
And, you know, it's very important that we label these people exactly what they are. They are not, what was the word they called themselves, international workers? They're invaders is what they are doing. They're using the fact that they have this massive group of people to essentially just walk across the United States southern border, go where they please, and then, you know, abuse the system, get on different welfare programs, try to take jobs from people. And, you know, they think they're trying to make their lives better, while at the expense it's making lives worse for everybody else. And then eventually, somewhere down the line, when a Democrat does get elected back president and all these people are legalized, all of a sudden they're citizens of a country, have voting power, and we know exactly which side they are going to vote for. That's part of the reason why the left is even supporting these people in the first place. That's the whole idea behind it. And, you know, it's unfortunate that this is allowed to happen because, you know, if you really want to take things to the place you want to go, you could say that. Do American citizens have the right to expel, use deadly force on people in trying to invade their country? If you got, you know, a group of a couple hundred good old boys at the border pointing guns at these people, would they legally have the right to shoot them? I'm legit almost asking that question. These people are trying to invade your country. Do you have the right to protect your homeland? I say yes. If you can't stop these people through any legal means, then do what you can. Granted, I'm not advocating for murder in the slightest, but I'm saying is you have to do something if the government does nothing.
Yeah, most definitely. And, you know, this is an instance where, you know, Trump really needs to act. We can't let this caravan come to the United States. As I said, if this caravan makes it, you're going to see more waves of this. You know, first it could just start with, you know, 2,000 in this wave. What's stopping 100,000 coming? What's stopping 200,000? What's stopping 500,000? And, you know, can the south of Texas and New Mexico really take, you know, the battering like this?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. You know, the communities in the border cannot sustain this massive a flow that could potentially be coming. So, you know, I mentioned the president on this, and he actually had a tweet on this caravan using the word caravan.
It's that a couple of tweets on
a couple of tweets. Do you want to go over them now, Bobby?
Yeah, the first one he said was, this was sent this morning at about 9 o'clock in the morning. He said, 9 o'clock Central Time, that is. He said, quote, Border Patrol agents are not allowed to properly do their job at the border because of ridiculous liberal Democrat laws like catch and release. Getting more dangerous. Caravans coming. Republicans must go to nuclear option to pass tough laws now. No more DACA deal. And, you know, that's the tweet that a lot of people have been talking about throughout the day, is the fact that he finally declared no more DACA deal. You know, this entire time he's essentially, you know, we know that Trump does not care what happens to DACA. He wants these people gone, just like we want these people gone. And the fact that people get mad at him every time he brings it up, he's bringing that up to make the Democrats look bad. That's the reason he keeps bringing it up. When in reality, nothing's really going on. So, you know, we finally, I guess, we're officially taking the position that, yeah, there is no more DACA deal. DACA's ended, and once we beat this thing in the courts, these people are gone. The second tweet he did, which came at about 9:30 in the morning, said, quote, Mexico is doing very little, if nothing, at stopping people from flowing into Mexico through their southern border and then into the U.S. They laugh at our dumb immigration laws. They must stop big drug and people flows, or I will stop their cash cow, NAFTA. Need wall. The last thing he said was, these big flows of people are all trying to take advantage of DACA. They want in on the act. And, you know, it is true. A lot of these people are going to get on the DACA program as long as the DACA program is allowed by the courts to continue the way it's supposed to be continuing.
Yeah.
And once those people are on that, their parents are also going to try to get on other programs as well. I guarantee you some of those women are pregnant too. And if they give birth, once they get to the United States, guess which family just now gets benefits?
Yeah, you know, it's important, you know, when you're mentioning DACA, like you said, they understand that if they come here as a child, they can prey on the sympathy that a lot of Americans have towards, you know, people that are DACA, and they will be fought for just like the 800,000 DACA recipients we already have. Like, there's nothing different, and we will continuously fight, and we will continuously abdicate unless we do not fight right now and say no. And tell our representatives and tell the president no. And, you know, when saying that, there are things that you can do yourself right now to do so. So we are going to give some information, you know, maybe keep note of where this is, or, you know, we'll also have this in the description. The first thing I want to talk about is the phone number for the White House.
Yes.
So on Monday, you know, as of recording now on Sunday, they're not open. But as of Monday morning, you can call into the White House and tell them that you want President Trump to do something about this caravan coming, that we need to stop it. Be it, you know, calling the National Guard or the Texas Rangers, whatever it may be, he needs to act on that. So the number for the White House switchboard to tell the White House you want them to act on this is 202-456-1111. That's 202-456-1111. There is also an online form that you can send to the White House. We will leave that in the description as well. And there's also a way to contact your congressman. We will leave that in the description as well. I guess I can read off how you could contact them as well.
Yeah, you can go ahead. Might as well.
To contact the online form for the White House, it's www.whitehouse.gov/contact. And to contact your representative, it's callyourrep.co. And you just put in your address there, and it will show you who your representatives are and their phone number and their office. But, you know, this is something you can actually do. We look at, you know, how Trump has been over the course of his administration. When we get angry about things and we make a ruckus and we call the White House, and, you know, when we also call our members of Congress and tell them that something is important, they do take notice of that.
They do.
A lot of people are planning on doing it on Monday. I've already sent the form in myself for the White House, but I'll be calling the White House tomorrow, and I encourage everyone to do so. It doesn't take a lot. But yeah, with that said, do you want to move on now to some election stuff, Bobby?
Yes, I do. Go right ahead.
So the only thing that we have this week for election is we got some stuff that happened here in Texas in Harris County, which, if you don't know, Harris County is the county Houston is in. We have a circumstance of Houston County being accused of allowing non-citizens to vote. The Office of Harris County Voter Registrar, a Texas county was accused of recklessly hiding voter data for non-citizens from the public eye. The Office of the Harris County Voter Registrar is deceptively withholding information related to possible non-citizen voters, according to a new lawsuit filed by the Public Interest Legal Foundation, or PILF. The PILF is a nonprofit public interest firm that specializes in investigating election fraud and advocacy for government transparency. The suit alleges that the county office violated federal law by failing to disclose the data. Section 8 of the National Voter Registration Act of 1993 allows individuals the right to request an inspection or seek copies of records related to the operational procedures for official government lists of eligible voters, according to legal experts at PILF. So, according to PILF, the group submitted a brief in April of 2015 in front of the U.S. Supreme Court that detailed a sample of 13 unique cases. That's 13 cases in Harris County where non-citizens have been able to vote. Each of these cases identify individuals who admitted to being non-citizens or refused to declare their status when applying to vote. Despite their fraudulent behavior, they are still registered and guaranteed the same voting right as citizens. So, what do you think of this, Bobby?
I think that they're not being punished enough. And I also think that if you people out there believe that those 13 cases, which, as they said, is just a sample of them.
Those were just 13 samples they were doing.
Those 13 that they randomly drew out of the hat. And every single one of them came back and said, yes, there was an illegal that voted here.
Yeah, PILF went on to say that they claim that there are actually thousands that they've discovered in, the Harris County voting system every year that they find that are non-citizens voting.
Exactly. And these are people that should not be voting. They shouldn't even be in our country. Not necessarily some, because some
some could be legal residents, but you just don't get to vote.
They should not still be voting in our elections, and their voice is not equal to ours.
Yeah. So they always say on the left, the great big meme about it is voter fraud doesn't happen, doesn't exist. But here we have PILF. They went out, they got a lawsuit going on right now, and they got evidence to back it up. There's reason to believe there's massive fraud happening, and it's not just happening in Houston.
It's happening all across the country.
It's happening all over, over the course of doing this program the last year. We've done at least, 20 different stories on voter fraud. It's a big problem in this country, and, if we want a clean election come the midterms and the primaries that are coming up in different states, we need to do something about this issue. Anything else, Bobby?
No, that's really all I had to say. I'm pretty much ready to move on to the next story.
Let's move on now to the bottom of the stack news we have for this week. The first thing that we have is in regards to Mitch McConnell introducing a bill.
Yes. During a trip to his home state of Kentucky, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell announced that he will be introducing a bill to legalize hemp as an agricultural commodity. Quote, I just had an opportunity to see some interesting and innovative products made with Kentucky-grown hemp, he said while speaking in Frankfort, Kentucky on Monday. Sunstrand, based in Louisville, contracts with farmers in Henry County to grow hemp as they process into a number of consumer products, including home insulation. Imagine, instead of pink fiberglass, we could use Kentucky-grown, environmentally sustainable hemp to insulate our houses. This represents just one of many uses that Kentuckians are finding for this versatile crop. He continued to say, quote, so I'll be introducing when I get back to the Senate a week from Monday a bipartisan bill in the Senate to continue to support this important Kentucky industry. It will be the Hemp Farm Act of 2018. What will it do? He said, quote, "First and foremost, this will finally legalize hemp. Legalize hemp as an agricultural commodity and remove it from the controlled substances list."
So yeah, some good stuff, some first steps towards the road of the possibility of at least federal legalization of marijuana. You know, someone like Mitch McConnell not showing hesitancy around hemp, you know, something that has been in the same sphere of, you know, controversy. It's a step in the right direction.
It is, and you know, people forget and people remember that hemp is, you know, you can use that for a lot of different things. I mean, there are plenty of products out there that, you know, entire industries that could be completely destroyed or turned over if hemp is legalized and used instead of other different products. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, most definitely. Do you want to move now on to a particular article on the Second Amendment?
Yeah, we got a few things about the Second Amendment here, but we can start with the one that you've got here.
So I wanted to talk about an article, and I want to read some of an article that came out in the New York Times this week by John Paul Stevens. He's a former Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. He was in that position from 1975 until he retired in 2010. So he was involved in the Supreme Court for quite a while.
Yes, he was.
Quite a while. And the op-ed he gave for the New York Times this week is titled "Repeal the Second Amendment." So let me get into some of the stuff here. Rarely in my lifetime have I seen the type of civic engagement school children and their supporters demonstrated in Washington and other major cities throughout the country this past Sunday. He's talking about the March for Our Lives marches. And feel free to interrupt me at any point you want to talk about this, Bobby.
Yeah, of course.
These demonstrations demand our respect. They reveal the broad public support for legislation to minimize the risk of mass killings of school children and others in our society. That support is a clear sign to lawmakers to enact legislation prohibiting civilian ownership of semi-automatic weapons, increasing the minimum age to buy a gun from 18 to 21, and establishing more comprehensive background checks on all purchases of firearms. But the demonstrators should seek more effective and more lasting reform. They should demand a repeal of the Second Amendment.
And, you know, that's where I want to interrupt right there, because, you know, they talk about how, oh, you know, everybody wants all these background checks. You know, vast majority of the country wants these background checks. But, you know, when you look at the actual polling, very broad questions like, do you support increased background checks? Of course the vast majority of people say yes. But once you start actually specifying what those policies really are, that support starts to diminish. Like when you start asking people specific questions like, do you want to ban AR-15s? Or do you want to ban high-capacity magazines? Do you want to ban bump stocks, even though technically those are now banned? The support for those types of things drops significantly. Especially when you can't define, you know, people say, oh, we want to make sure that people with mental illness can't get guns. Well, what do you define as a mental illness? I mean, we all know exactly what they mean by mental illness. They're going to try to define that for anyone that's a conservative. That's obviously the case.
Or does every single person that has, you know, depression for a while and gets on medication for that, do they lose their rights to the Second Amendment? But, you know, one in the article, he acts as though civilians calling for prohibition on semi-automatic weapons, he doesn't think that sounds like a crazy thing whatsoever. He doesn't think that's even going far enough.
No, I mean,
repealing the Second Amendment, you know, private ownership of guns is illegal.
Yeah.
It's some radical stuff.
And
for a guy that worked to uphold the Constitution.
I mean, no, he didn't. Let's face that. No, he didn't. But, you know, they talk about how, oh, you know, we want to ban, we don't want these assault weapons to be here. And they say, why do you need an assault weapon? Well, I mean, the answer's clear. It's, you know, in case I'm ever under assault, right? Thank you to Austin Peterson for Senate for Missouri for giving me that little quote there, who is also trying to, he said he wants to legalize automatic weapons and repeal the National Firearms Act. So, I mean, I'm not going to vote for him because he's still a cucky libertarian. But, you know, if you want to go and try to legalize fully automatic weapons, go for it, bro. In fact, I'd probably vote for that bill myself because I'm just that type of person. But, you know, it comes back to just the whole point that is the idea behind what they're trying to do. They're not trying to impose greater restrictions. Their ultimate goal is the repeal of the Second Amendment. And if possible, you know, it is going to be impossible to actually have a full-scale gun confiscation in the United States. But, you know, doesn't mean that they're not going to try it.
Yeah.
And once they gain power, they're going to do it. That's plainly clear.
Let me read some more of this article.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Concerned that a national standing army might pose a threat to the security of the separate states led to the adoption of that amendment, which provides that, quote, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a freed state and the right of the peoples to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Today, that concern is a relic of the 18th century.
Gonna interrupt again. You know, it's unfortunate that these people that we put on the Supreme Court are supposed to be these champions and these defenders of the Constitution, yet his idea and understanding of the Second Amendment is as juvenile as every other person on the left, especially when they try to use the whole well-regulated militia. If you look at the definitions of what well-regulated meant at the time of writing the damn law, writing the amendment there, well-regulated meant in working condition, working well. The militia was the people. Just thought I'd point that out.
Yeah. Let me continue some more on this. For over 200 years after the adoption of the Second Amendment, it was uniformly understood as not placing any limit on either federal or state authority to enact gun control legislation. In 1939, the Supreme Court unanimously held that Congress could prohibit the possession of a sawed-off shotgun because the weapon had no reasonable relation to the preservation or efficiency of a well-regulated militia. During the years when Warren Burger was our Chief Justice from 1969 to 1986, no judge, federal or state, as far as I am aware, expressed any doubt as to the limited coverage of the amendment. When organizations like the National Rifle Association disagree with that position and begin their campaigns claiming that federal regulation of firearms curtails Second Amendment rights, Chief Justice Burger publicly characterized the NRA as perpetuating, quote, one of the greatest pieces of fraud, I repeat the word fraud, on the American public by special interest groups that I have ever seen in my lifetime.
We're going to continue to read the entire thing here?
There's about 2 paragraphs left.
Well, I'll just go into the next paragraph here. So he, in the next paragraph, he kind of goes into talking about how, in 2008, the ruling District of Columbia versus, in 2008, he said that both Justice Burger and others' long-standing understanding of the Second Amendment limited that ruling, but in D.C. versus Heller, they did reaffirm that there was a right to bear arms. And if you don't remember, this Justice Stevens was one of the dissenters in that case. So it shows you how much of a staunch defender of the Constitution he is there. Anyways, I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, so, he's talking about how that the NRA is perpetuating some massive fraud on behalf of special interests against the American public. But the thing is, the NRA is a special interest for the American public. It has over 5 million members. It gets all of its dues, pays for all the lobbying it does.
It's the country's oldest civil rights organization.
Yeah, this is people group advocating for issues that matter to themselves. He acts as though it is this massive propaganda scheme on behalf
of... if you look at the actual donations they make to congressmen is nothing in comparison to many organizations that are out there.
Yeah, in terms of lobbying, in terms of dollars anyways, they're not even in the top 100, organizations as far as money they're putting out. We're supposed to believe that the NRA has this immense power, that sways policy, as though, these Republican congressmen that receive dollars from them don't actually hold those positions earnestly. They don't need NRA funding to have that viewpoint on guns and gun rights. But Yeah, I just, I wanted to talk about this article this week because, they always want to say, oh, we're not coming after your guns. We're not coming after your guns. This is someone that's actually finally now able to just say, yeah, we want to repeal the Second Amendment. It is about coming after the guns.
Yeah,
and you're seeing more and more people actually getting behind this. And this is someone who actually worked for the Supreme Court, in matters of the Constitution. And in his view, he doesn't see that there should even be a Second Amendment. It's something else.
Yeah, and there was a recent poll that was taken by YouGov found 39% of Democrats actually want a full repeal of the Second Amendment. 4 in 10 Democrats want a full repeal of the Second Amendment. Can you imagine that?
It's some staggering stuff.
That's like 2 in 10 Americans.
Yeah.
But anyways, there is some good news in regards to what you said to the NRA. In terms of all these attacks, keep them going, because donations to the NRA have tripled since the Parkland shooting in February. So, for all you Democrats out there that want to repeal the Second Amendment and hate the NRA, congratulations, you just made them stronger than ever before. Good for them.
Yeah. Let's move on now to the last thing that we have before we're going into current year college craziness, and that is Judge Reinhardt of the Ninth Circuit Court has died this week.
He's died at the age of 87, and if you don't know who Stephen Reinhardt is, he was one of the judges on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. He was on there for nearly 4 decades. He died of a heart attack in Los Angeles, and according to Ninth Circuit Chief Judge Sidney Thomas, he said in a statement, quote, "He will be remembered as one of the giants of the federal bench." He was appointed by Jimmy Carter, President Jimmy Carter, back in 1979, became the 6th longest serving judge in the court. Was also considered to be one of the most liberal judges on the court, and he is pretty much the guy that has been a thorn in our side this entire time. In fact, in 2012, he was the one who wrote the opinion striking down California's gay marriage ban. He was also the one who wrote the 1996 opinion that struck down a Washington state law that prohibited doctors from prescribing medication to help terminally ill patients die. So he was one of those guys that wanted to keep those people alive. But ever since Trump came on the scene, this is the guy that has consistently, every single time cases have gone to the Ninth Circuit, has sided against President Trump. So you shouldn't be celebrating when your enemies die. But at the same time, you should be celebrating when your enemies die. And I, have nothing positive that I can say about Justice Reinhardt there, other than, I'm glad you're gone, dude, and we're going to replace you with a conservative justice now, hopefully. And if we actually do that, obviously that's not going to be enough to sway that court since how liberal it is. But if we can at least get one more dissenting voice out there, that's good enough for me in going so far as to try to, do something to stop that court's overstep and overreach of power.
Most definitely. With that said, let's go on to some current year college craziness. Current year college craziness, segment of the show where we talk about the crazy stuff that happens on college campuses here and abroad, but predominantly here because we just got the best, the very best in terms of crazy colleges. And this week we only actually have one story that we're gonna go over. Sadly, I didn't really see much this week. To really talk about. But, I guess it happens. But the one story that we have this week is from the College of the Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts.
I think they were on our show last week for a story as well.
I don't remember,
we
but
just
maybe
recently talked about them. I know that.
Yes. So a theology professor at the Catholic College, Holy Cross, is making some bizarre, some would even say blasphemous claims about Jesus Christ that has caused a stir on campus. Dr. Tai Seong Benny Liu, he's an Asian man, said Jesus was a drag king who had queer desires. He also claims that the Last Supper was a literary striptease and that Jesus was not a man but gender fluid. The Gospel of John professor cites the book of John in the Bible to try and back his arguments.
I don't know where in the book of John you'd possibly be able to say that Jesus was a drag queen? He was gender fluid? Someone's going to go to hell, I'll tell you that.
Let me read some of his quotes. Maybe that will help.
Yeah, go right ahead, please.
Christ ends up appearing in a drag kingly bride in his passion, he argues. If one follows the trajectory of the wisdom, word, or Sophia Jesus configuration, what we have in John's Jesus is not only a king of Israel, but a king of the Iowa, or Jews, but also a drag king. Then he uses Jesus' crucifixion to try and show the passion of Christ was really a homosexual bonding of the Father and the Son. Quote, what I am suggesting that when Jesus' body is being penetrated, his thoughts are on his Father. He is, in other words, imagining his passion experience as a masochistic sexual relation with his own Father.
What the fuck is wrong with this guy?
It's, I'm not a religious person. It is Easter today, but it does seem like some very, very offensive things to be saying.
You know, it seems that, God kind of changed things from the Old Testament to the New Testament in terms of striking down people, but I'll tell you, if the lightning bolt came down and struck Mr. Liu and got rid of him, I'd probably look the other way and not really say anything, because this guy... What is wrong with these people? How the hell is this guy a theology professor at a Catholic university, claiming Jesus was a drag queen, he was gay, he was thinking about all these things with, sexual relations with his own Father? Where do they find these people?
I have no idea.
Why are these people allowed to exist? God.
It's very strange. Let me continue on this a little bit, since this is the only story, though. Liu also suggested Jesus was trying to get his followers to join in. The controversial professor uses the example of Thomas after the resurrection, putting his finger in Jesus' side, which the New Testament scholars argue was an example of John asking his readers to, quote, to perform a kind of pan-exorcism. And the Last Supper... Eroticism. I'm sorry. Said the wrong word there. In the Last Supper, when Jesus washed his disciples' feet, was a, quote, seductive literary striptease and a womanly/slavish task used as an example of John's transgender interpretation of Jesus, the professor claims.
I don't even know what more I can even say about this guy here.
Yeah. It's some weird stuff.
God, this article just keeps going and going and going with this guy saying stuff like that.
Yeah, it only gets crazier as he goes on. Transgender Jesus, who was in a homosexual relation with God, and he performed a seductive striptease at the Last Supper for his disciples that he wanted to get it on with. According to this doctor of theology.
Doctor
of theology. And, this is, it always goes to show when we talk on the show about Career College craziness, some of the dumbest people are very smart people.
Mm-hmm.
This guy is a doctor, and he believes absolutely retarded things,
Just because you're educated doesn't mean you're smart.
Yeah. And that's the moral of the story on this segment every week. But, apologies, this is the only story that we have for Career College Craziness this week.
You're going to have some weeks where there's not that many stories.
Most definitely. And a lot of colleges have actually been on spring break this week.
That's true. A lot of northern colleges tend to take their spring break later.
That was the case in Missouri this week. I was, in Kansas City. Let's go on now to the final segment of the show, though, and that is international news. Yeah,
we actually have some both good and bad information coming out from internationally, but the first stories that we have up are out of Asia. So, Enzo, how about you start us off here with some news out of China?
So, the first thing that I wanted to get into is this week, China has announced the creation of the Petro Yuan. The yuan is their currency in China, if you are unaware. And this will help Russia and China to dump the U.S. petrodollar for oil trade. So what the petrodollar is nations require, nations such as OPEC nations, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the works. They require oil to be traded in U.S. dollars. Thus the term petrodollar has come about. But as of now, China is moving to create the petro yuan to create an agreement between Russia and China to start reducing their payments in dollars and move over onto this new currency. There's a settlement on Russian oil deliveries to China, which is upwards of around 60 million tons per year of oil, and all of this will now all be done without the use of a dollar whatsoever. So this really is a work to strategically take away hegemonic global capitalistic power from the United States and put it in the hands of the Chinese.
Mm-hmm. So you know what? It's very unfortunate that they got to do this, because if you remember back, people have used the whole excuse of why did we invade Iraq? Why did we, launch the war in Libya? It is true, those two countries did try to not follow the whole petrodollar standard. So, frankly, at this point, I'm not really sure if this is going to negatively or positively affect us. I mean, it's obviously going to negatively affect the global oil market if you're going to start having countries not be trading on U.S. dollars. But, it's just one of those things where, foreign countries have the right to do whatever they want. I firmly believe that. But at the same time, we have control over something. We might as well maintain it. And so I'm going to go ahead and, for this one, maintain relatively neutral on it, although I would say that it's probably not going to help us at all.
On the very first day of trading for the petro yuan, $4 billion worth of petro yuans were traded. So there is interest in this stuff. We can move on, though, to another Asian country and its connection to the United States economically. And this is actually some good stuff.
Yeah,
this is
very good stuff.
Steel tariffs and South Korea. Seoul and Washington are hailing an agreement to revise their free trade deal as a win-win after South Korea agreed to further open its auto markets, and the Trump administration said it would not impose steel tariffs on the country, the third largest exporter of steel to the United States. South Korea would have to limit steel exports to 70% of the current levels as part of the deal, which has been agreed to in principle. The agreement removes the cloud of trade-related doubt that has been hovering over South Korea since President Trump came to office threatening to rip up job-killing free trade deals between the allies. And then here's a quote from the Trade Minister of South Korea, Kim Hyong-chung. He said, quote, "The best result from a negotiation is when both sides leave the table feeling like they didn't get everything they wanted. If the result is too lopsided in favor of one side, there might have to be a renegotiation later." But he says that he hopes there will be no need for renegotiation in the future.
And if you're wondering what the U.S. has to do as part of their part in the negotiation, under the revised agreement, U.S. automakers will be actually allowed to export 50,000 vehicles a year to South Korea, which is double the current existing quota. And also, they will have to meet only American safety standards and environmental standards, not just the South Korean ones. So, by them limiting their steel exports to the United States in exchange for us being able to expand our cars that we export to South Korea, it is a win-win, and it's going to benefit both countries. And
it reduces our trade deficit with South Korea.
Exactly, and if you're wondering, our trade deficit with South Korea last year was $18 billion, which is actually down from 2016 when it was at $23 billion. So it is trending in the right direction, and hopefully we'll be able to close some of these gaps. And, the economy and the markets kind of went down a little bit when there's fear of these trade wars, but as stories like this keep coming out that countries are actually willing to negotiate with us over these different trade deals, it's actually showing that it's working out very, very well, and Trump knows what he's doing here.
Yeah. Moving on, let's talk about some stuff with South Korea's neighbor to the north, North Korea, and the negotiations for peace with them. You want to talk about that, Bobby?
Yeah, this story that we're about to talk about has the potential to probably be one of the most important stories of the year if it can actually get accomplished. And that is, China is claiming that Kim Jong-un has agreed to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. So if you don't know, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, he visited China on Sunday and met with Chinese President Xi. It was Kim's first known journey abroad since 2011, and also it's in preparation for the upcoming South Korea and United States summits that are happening there. And, Trump said that he's going to be meeting with Kim Jong-un here soon, I believe at this summit. So, the fact that North Korea's missile programs, they haven't done any more tests. Kim Jong-un is starting to talk about the fact that he is open to, talks and even denuclearization. And all of this is stemming from President Trump's leadership and President Xi's leadership and the cooperation and agreement that them, along with the South Korean president, have all done together as part of this entire process. So, this is one of those things where if other things don't necessarily work out for Trump's agenda, one of the things where hopefully he'll be able to actually say he accomplished something good was finally dealing with the North Korean situation, because it looks like we have a very good chance of actually solving it right now.
Most definitely, and it would definitely help Trump and his approval ratings if he was able to negotiate such a historic and presidential moment of peace, in North Korea. So I don't have anything else on that. Do you want to move on to another continent? I don't know what you want to go on to next.
Next up, we're going to the Middle East, and then we're going to Europe after that.
Okay.
I just forgot to reorder these things.
Let's get into the Middle East. So the first thing that we want to get into is Trump's had some stuff to say about Syria this week that I believe we're both pleased to hear.
Yeah, President Donald Trump has made a surprise announcement that U.S. forces will be withdrawing from Syria, citing the defeat of ISIS and the need to defend U.S. borders and rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. Quote, "We are coming out of Syria very soon. Let the other people take care of it now," Trump said during a speech in Richfield, Ohio on Thursday, which was a speech that he was giving dedicating to his infrastructure initiative. So essentially, during the speech he went on and he said a couple of quotes like, quote, "We build a school, they blow it up. We rebuild the school, they haven't blown it up yet, but they will. Is there something a little bit wrong with that?" he asked the crowd. And he went on to say regarding Syria, he said, quote, "We're there for one reason, to get ISIS and get rid of ISIS and go home. We're not there for any other reason, and we have largely accomplished that goal." So, we've talked about this, how ISIS essentially has been defeated in Iraq and Syria. There's still pockets in areas, and there's still pockets in other countries around the world. They still pose a grand threat to countries all over the world. Let's not kid ourselves here, but their territory, they've lost almost 100% of their territory now. They've essentially been defeated in both Iraq and Syria. So our mission there is done. And the fact that Trump's saying, you know what, guys, prepare to come home because you're coming home. That's the first time I've heard the president actually tell people to prepare to come home instead of just saying, "I promise bringing people home" in a very, very long time. It looks like we're actually about to get out of a war.
Which is great as opposed to the alternative of staying in Syria and continuing to destabilize the country and to continue to advocate for regime change in Syria, which will only bring about more violence and instability.
So hopefully that actually happens. Obviously there's no timetable there, but I'm going to hold your feet to the fire there, President Trump. I want our boys back home.
Most definitely. Moving on now to some stuff out of Israel we want to talk about. And that is some border clashes on the Gaza-Israeli border. Thousands had marched to the border at the start of a 6-week protest march, the Great March of Return. I believe there was, yes, and the first day of these protests was, I believe, 2 days ago.
And this was where the border on the Israel and Gaza Strip, I believe, right?
Yes, on 5 different locations on that border. On the very first day, they had an instance of 17,000 Palestinians come up to the border between the two states, and many of the individuals had passed the enclosed-off military zone that the Israeli military puts out there. And Israeli troops opened fire. At least 16 have been killed in the border clashes, and more than 400 have been reported wounded as of this point. Yeah, not the best stuff. You don't particularly want people to be dying in, protest instances. There was some fears by the Israelis that with the amount of people there, thousands upon thousands, there's going to be a mad rush to, breach the border. But I don't know. You don't want instances where hundreds of people have to be shot, obviously.
No, of course not.
But yeah, this is part of, as I said, the Great March of Return. The protest started, as I said, 2 days ago on March 30th, and they'll be continuing to protest till May 15th.
Yeah, they're expecting those protests to get over 100,000 people.
Yeah, so, the classes have just started this weekend, but there's going to be more.
It's going to continue. More people are going to die, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. So, that's going on in the world, and you need to be aware of that.
Let's go to Australia next, just to.
We weren't going to do Australia. Remember?
Oh yeah, that's right. My bad.
So we're going to close out this week with some European news, though. What's the first thing we have for Europe?
First thing we have up is some new numbers regarding London's murder rate, and that is that the murder rate for the first time in London has beaten New York City, and a lot of that has to do with the increase in knife attacks. They said that in March, according to the British publication, there have been 22 killings in London versus 21 in New York. Now, if you're wondering about actual rate of things, there's about 8.7 million people in London and about 8.5 million people in New York City. And then if you add just the general metropolitan areas, they're roughly the same size in terms of number of people. But the actual cities have almost identical numbers of people. And so the fact that there was 22 killings in London, 21 in New York, the rate for the first time ever of London is a lot higher. They've said that the actual murder rate in London has risen by 38% since 2014. That is definitely not good. And if you're wondering just how far it has come over history and historical times, there's FBI data and crime studies that show that since 1800, London has typically had a murder rate per person of between half of a person in New York City. So, definitely not very good there at all.
Definitely not. There was actually another instance of mass crime in Germany this week that we didn't actually have on the docket. But
was there?
If you were good, I would actually like to talk about it as well.
Yeah, go right ahead.
There was actually this week on Thursday, this happened in Duisburg, Germany. There was an instance where they actually had to declare a state of emergency.
Interesting.
60 men armed with machetes and metal pipes broke out into a street battle in the city center of Duisburg. The police had to be called, and then they used CS gas to control the situation. Around 50 people were arrested, and what the police officials told the newspaper there, that the fighting there was between three rival gangs of Turks, Lebanese, and Kurds. So we're seeing it, and think about these regions, especially Turks and Kurds. They hate each other. Mm-hmm. They hate each other. We have an instance now where with the migrant crisis, we have all these people that still have their ethnic hatreds of each other from their homeland, and they're bringing it to the streets of Europe. Mass battles in cities in Germany because, they didn't keep these people out. That, these people don't need to be there. They're not doing anything productive.
Not supposed to be there either.
No. But, I just wanted to bring that up. That was something that I noticed that we didn't have on the show.
Yeah, thank you for bringing it up.
But do you want to move on now to some statistics you wanted to get into?
Yes, and these are some statistics that if you're the type of person that really likes to be updated with statistics, you are going to love these. So, a massive poll covering 28 countries in the European Union was conducted by the Zazadveg Foundation's Project 28, finding that 78% of all Europeans believe that illegal immigration into their countries is a problem. What's more, the poll revealed that more citizens in every single European country say that it is a serious problem than say that it is not a problem or not a very serious problem. So that is very, very important, the fact that we are having pluralities and majorities in these polls. There's some other data that they say here that I want to get into here real quick. 68% say that they either strongly fear or moderately fear the prospect of African migrants arriving en masse into Europe over the next decade. 70% believe that a growing Muslim population that a growing Muslim presence is a problem, compared to only 8% saying that it isn't a threat at all. So 70% say it's a problem, 8% say it's not a problem. Those numbers definitely in our favor there. 57% said the influx of immigrants will change the culture of their countries. 73% said that managing immigration will pose a huge financial burden on their countries. Only 17% believe that the cost of handling immigration will not be huge. So, you know, these people, they understand exactly how their economies are going to be affected by these migrants coming into their countries. Yeah. And the final couple stats that we have here, only 24% of people believe that Brussels has done a better job in handling the crisis than Central and Eastern European nations who have repeatedly pushed back against the European Union's policies. Only 24% of Europeans think that the EU is handling the migrant crisis better than countries like Poland and Hungary and Romania.
Yeah. So yeah, very, very telling, you know, statistics on the viewpoints of Europe and Europeans. You know, it's similar to the stuff that we saw with the Harvard-Harris poll here in the United States.
Yeah.
This is stuff that us Western people are feeling, you know, currently to a very great degree, and we're made to feel like our viewpoints aren't mainstream, that we are radical, you know, far right, but this is what most people feel.
Yeah.
You know,
when people are actually able to voice their opinion and truly say what they believe, you realize the vast majority are like, yeah, I don't want this to be happening. This is causing problems, and I don't think it's going to get any better.
Yeah. Let's move on now to some stuff from Pope Francis.
Yeah, the final two stories here, it is Easter Sunday, so we wanted to kind of close with these final stories here. The first up is about Pope Francis, and this is your story, so I'll let you get it.
So this week, Pope Francis was doing an interview with a longtime atheist friend of his, Eugenio Scalfari, and it was an interview done for La Repubblica. And in the course of the interview, the Pope Francis goes on to say that there is no hell whatsoever. So I can read the quotes. They were translated from Italian. This is Scalfari to the Pope. Your Holiness, in our previous meetings, you told me that our species will disappear in a certain moment, and that God, still out of his creative force, will create new species. You have never spoken to me about the souls who died in sin and will go to hell to suffer for eternity. You have, however, spoken to me of good souls admitted to the contemplation of God. But what about bad souls? Where are they punished? And then Pope Francis responds, quote, "They are not punished. Those who repent obtain the forgiveness of God and enter the ranks of souls who contemplate him. But those who do not repent and cannot therefore be forgiven disappear. There is no hell. There is the disappearance of sinful souls."
That doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, no, Pope Francis
is communist.
Pope Francis believes, and I mean, I'm not a religious person, but I mean, I understand what Christianity in general believes. He believes that there's no hell. Sinful people, when they die, their souls just disappear.
I'd love to see him point out where exactly in the Bible anything points to that being, you know, anywhere near accurate.
But, yeah, you know, this is just one of the biggest figures in all of Christianity, and this is what he believes.
It really makes me question these people again.
Let's go on to our last story of the week, also related to Christianity because it's Easter today.
And although this story is not a story that is an international story, I did want to put it together because, as you said, it is Easter, so maybe we should look at the Easter story in a different light. This time coming from a CNN article that was written by their writer, John Blake, and him telling that the biblical story of Easter is a hashtag #MeToo moment for Mary Magdalene. The CNN article by John Blake starts off by saying, quote, "The men refused to listen to her story. She was publicly smeared as a whore. And then, when she emerged as a celebrated advocate, powerful men tried to silence her because she threatened their status. Nevertheless, she persisted. The woman we're talking about, though, is not a leader in the hashtag #MeToo moment, the viral campaign raising awareness about sexual assault and harassing against women. She is Mary Magdalene, the first person Jesus appeared to after his resurrection, according to the New Testament, and the first person to preach the good news that he had been raised from the dead." He then goes on to say that another comparison between Christ's crucifixion and hashtag #MeToo is the use of sexual humiliation. The person, I'm sorry, I lost track here. He then goes on to say essentially that CNN compared further the humiliation that Jesus experienced from his nakedness on the cross to, quote, "infamous photos of naked Iraqi prisoners stacked on top of one each other like a pyramid by U.S. soldiers in the Abu Ghraib prison." So yeah, Enzo, did you know that the story of Easter is actually one of the world's oldest versions of hashtag #MeToo? Because the men didn't like the fact that the woman was trying to subvert and destroy their power, but nevertheless, she persisted, Enzo. She persisted. And then Jesus appeared to her.
This is one of the strangest things I've ever heard someone try to claim whatsoever. I guess strangest thing I've ever heard since in regards to Christianity since the last story.
Yeah.
But
oh, there was one more I could have included here. It was another article, I believe this one was also CNN, talking about how Christianity does nothing but defend white supremacy, but they used a picture of the KKK in that, so that shows you how far CNN's willing to go to smear their opponents.
But yeah, Mary Me Too with Jesus on Easter.
Apparently she got Me Too'd by John and Paul there.
Yeah, the men didn't believe her. It was the Israeli patriarchy, I guess, ancient Judaic patriarchy. I don't know. It's so weird.
See, it's funny.
It's really reaching.
Because if you actually read the story, once Mary, once she discovered that, oh, Jesus ain't here no mo', she ran back to tell the guys, said, hey, Jesus' body's gone. You know what they did? Once they were like, uh-oh, we should go investigate this, they literally ran there. In fact, one of them outbeat the other guy because the other guy was older and slower. Why would they literally run there if they didn't actually believe her? They wanted to see for themselves. Yeah. Not a Me Too moment. If anything, it's a, oh my God, are you serious? Let's go.
Yeah.
Happy Easter, Enzo.
Happy Easter, Bobby. But yeah, that's the show for the week. I don't know how long we went.
Depending on, this is going to be edited, so, we might have to re-record part of the beginning. But what you're listening to, if you're a person who is listening to this, you'll be listening to a perfectly normal episode. So
yeah. But I think we had a pretty good, concise show this week. We went over a lot of different things, and I don't know. I'm interested to see where all these developments we talked about this week are going, as Absolutely. I do every single week. But with that said, do you have anything else you want to say, Bob, before we go?
The only things I would like to say is, remember, we do have a Patreon, and the link to that is in the description of this podcast episode here. So if you do want to support the podcast, that is the best place to go and do it. And we would absolutely appreciate it if you did that. Also, be sure to follow us on our various social media profiles. We are on Gab at Trump_Republic_radio. We're on PewTube. We're on YouTube. If you're listening, please like and subscribe to this video. That would be freaking awesome. And if you're on YouTube and you do subscribe, be sure to hit that little subscribe subscription bell. Therefore, you get notifications every single time that we go live on the show. It'll pop up and you'll never, ever miss it. Unless YouTube keeps changing their policies and screwing things around, in which case you might miss it. But that ain't our fault. My hands are clean.
Yeah, with that said, we just want to thank you for listening to another episode of Trump Public Radio, and have a good one.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.